Just as the soft warmth of the early morning was settling over them, a clatter from outside broke the stillness. California sat up, instantly alert, her gaze flicking toward the window. Another noise, a metallic clank, like the lid of a trash can being knocked over, echoed up from the driveway below. Curious and already on edge from last night's events, she slipped out of bed, moving quietly across the room to peer out the window. Her eyes landed on a boy, not more than 13, rummaging through the trash cans by the side of the house. His movements were quick, almost frantic, as if he was racing against time or the threat of being caught. "Hey," she called out instinctively, her voice sharp as she tapped on the window. The boy looked up, wide-eyed, a flash of panic in his expression. Without a moment's hesitation, he bolted, disappearing into the shadows cast by the houses and tall fences along the narrow street. She watched as his figure grew smaller, finally vanishing beyond the edge of their yard. By now, Sue had thrown on her robe, watching California with concern. "What's going on?" "There was a boy," California replied, grabbing her jeans from the chair and pulling them on quickly. "Young kid, going through the trash cans." I yelled, and he took off. She slipped on his shirt and nodded toward the door. "Come on, let's go see if he left anything behind." They hurried down the stairs, the remnants of the quiet morning disrupted by their hurried footsteps. The front door creaked open, and they stepped into the cool morning air, the light still soft and gray as it filtered through the tree branches. Together, they moved across the yard and into the driveway, looking around for any sign of the boy. But the driveway was empty. The trash can lids slightly askew, and the few scraps that had been tossed out lay scattered across the ground. Other than that, there was no sign of the intruder. The boy had vanished as quickly as he'd appeared. Sue sighed, tucking her hands into the pockets of her robe as she looked around, her expression softening with concern. There's been so much of this lately. So many homeless people around here. Kids, too. I didn't realize just how bad it was. California crossed her arms, leaning against the side of the house as she watched the street, still unsettled. "Yeah, it's not the best area, that's for sure. And with the way things are going," she trailed off, her eyes drifting to the spot where the boy had disappeared. "He looked young, too. I mean, I know what it's like to be out there, but a kid." Sue nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "It's heartbreaking, really. But what can we do?" She reached out, placing a gentle hand on California's shoulder. "You were right to yell, Cal. I don't know. Feels like we're seeing this more and more." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the neighborhood slowly came to life, people walking dogs and cars beginning to pass. Eventually, they headed back inside, closing the door behind them. The boy was gone and the streets were quiet again, but a lingering unease settled over them. A sense that something was shifting, that life outside their door wasn't as far removed as it once seemed. The day passed as normal and there were no security alerts on their phones. They met up after work for dinner and a movie, coming home late but not yet tired. They lay in bed, the dim glow of the bedside lamp casting warm shadows over the room. California was resting on her side, tracing gentle circles on Sue's arm, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. "So, if we're really going to do this whole happily ever after thing," she teased, "maybe we should get a couple of kids in the mix, just to keep things interesting." Sue's eyes lit up, her expression turning thoughtful. "You know, I wouldn't mind that," she replied softly. "I always wanted to be a mother. There was a time when I thought it might never happen, but I think we could make a great family." California looked at her, a touch of surprise in her gaze. She hadn't expected Sue to be serious, but the idea suddenly felt less like a joke and more like something real, something that could actually be theirs. "Really?" California asked, her voice a bit more tentative, as if testing the waters. Sue nodded, her eyes softening as she looked at California. "Yeah, I think we're ready. Maybe this is what was meant to be, you know? Us, together, building a family." They held each other's gaze, the warmth of shared dreams settling between them, and then they leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that spoke of hope, of plans yet to be made, of a future that felt full and bright. But just as the quiet joy was settling in, California's ears perked up and she pulled back slightly. "Did you hear that?" Sue blinked, disoriented. What? Sure, California whispered, tilting her head to listen. There it was again, the sound of a car door creaking open in the driveway below. Her eyes narrowed, and she slipped out of bed, motioning for Sue to follow. They dressed quickly, keeping their movements quiet as they made their way down the stairs, slipping out the side door into the cool night air. The driveway lay in shadow, illuminated only by a weak sliver of moonlight, and as they approached the car, California saw him. The same boy she'd seen digging through the trash cans, now rummaging through the front seat of their car. Hey, she called out, her voice low but firm. The boy's head snapped up, eyes wide with fear, and without a second's hesitation, he darted back across the yard, sprinting toward the back fence. California and Sue followed, moving quickly through the garden path, their footsteps crunching against gravel. They watched as the boy ducked under a hole in the ivy-covered fence, disappearing into the dense foliage beyond. California was right behind him, slipping through the gap with Sue close behind. They entered the abandoned part of the property, a secluded area where an old shop stood, nearly overtaken by vines and decay. Sue had mentioned once that she'd meant to have it torn down, but it hadn't seemed urgent. Now, as they approached, it looked almost eerie in the pale moonlight, as if it were hiding secrets of its own. California stepped forward, opening the door with a creak, her eyes scanning the dim, dusty interior. The place smelled of old wood and mildew, a dark, shadowed space cluttered with broken furniture and the remnants of forgotten tools. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted movement, a flash of something small and scared, ducking under an old desk in the corner. There he is, she whispered to Sue, nodding toward the boy's hiding spot. They approached slowly, crouching down to get a closer look. Huddled beneath the desk, the boy was watching them with wide, frightened eyes, his clothes dirty and torn, his face pale and wary. California's heart softened at the sight. He was just a kid, and by the looks of it, he'd been surviving out here for a while. Hey, she said gently, keeping her voice calm and low. It's okay. We're not here to hurt you. Are you hungry? The boy didn't respond, but his gaze flicked to Sue, who offered him a gentle smile. We have food inside, she said softly. If you come with us, you can eat. No one's going to hurt you. After a tense moment, the boy nodded slowly, crawling out from under the desk. They led him back to the house, his steps hesitant and wary, but he followed them inside, keeping his distance as they moved into the warmth of the kitchen. Sue pulled out a chair, setting a plate in front of him with a sandwich and some fruit. The boy eyed it, his expression unreadable, but he eventually began to eat, shoveling bites into his mouth with quick, practiced motions. California and Sue exchanged a glance, then stepped quietly out onto the back porch, the cool night air brushing against their faces as they closed the door behind them. So, what are we going to do? Sue whispered, her voice filled with concern. California sighed, her gaze drifting over the quiet yard, the tangled garden path that led to the old shop. I think we should take him to the police. It's the right thing to do. They'll be able to find a place for him, a foster home or something. Sue bit her lip, glancing back through the window where the boy was eating. I know, but look at him, Cal. He's terrified. What if he just runs again? California shrugged, her expression conflicted. If we don't do something, he's just going to end up back out there. And who knows what trouble he's gotten into already. They re-entered the kitchen, where the boy was still eating, though his gaze shifted warily as they approached. California cleared her throat, choosing her words carefully. Listen, we think it'd be best if we take you to the police. They'll be able to help you. At the mention of the police, the boy froze, his eyes widening in panic. He shook his head frantically, pushing back from the table, his entire body tense with fear. No, please don't. They'll take me in, lock me up. I've got a warrant for breaking in and stealing things. If you call them, I'll just run. These are there. He pushed his plate away, his hands clenched into fists, his gaze darting toward the door as if already planning his escape. California and Sue exchanged a worried look. California took a deep breath, then nodded to Sue. Can you give us a moment? They stepped back outside, standing in silence for a moment, listening to the quiet night around them. Finally, Sue spoke, her voice soft. Maybe we let him stay, just for a little while. We can get to know him, convince him to turn himself in eventually. Maybe he'll trust us enough to do it. California hesitated, but the memory of the boy's scared face, the way he looked so small and alone, swayed her. She nodded slowly. All right, we can give him a chance. When they re-entered, California approached him with a calm but serious look. You can stay here, but only if you agree to listen to us. We want to help you, all right? The boy looked between them, his eyes uncertain but hopeful, a flicker of relief breaking through his guarded expression. He nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly as he let out a small, grateful sigh. And with that, their lives shifted, a quiet understanding settling over them as they extended a hand to the boy who had, for some unknown reason, wandered into their world.